to the Influence Factory podcast. This program is dedicated to support professionals who have a desire to develop their digital business influence so they can navigate through a fast-paced, constantly growing digital world. We invite newcomers as well as our family of business influencers to a place to play, share ideas, questions, tips, and guidance with other thought leaders around the globe. Sit back and enjoy our program with our host Dean Delisle as he interviews guests. News and commentary is provided by Kate Hassett and Jackson Delisle. Power Move lessons are provided by the Influencer Marketing Department at Social Jack. And production, editing, and distribution is provided by the Social Jack production team.
This week's influencer guest is a new media influencer, host of the New Media Summit, founder of Liquor.com, a New York Times bestselling author, host of Reinvention Radio, and broadcasting live from sunny San Diego. Steve Olsher, how you doing?
What's up, buddy? How you doing, man?
You're previously a Chicagoan.
I am. I did my time. 44 years. Time served. I'm done.
So when you were here, were you Cubs fan or Sox fan?
Northsider, Cubs fan for sure.
Yeah, so good. I always have to ask that too. Now, so did you change to a Padres fan or doesn't matter?
I've been to a few games. Actually, I haven't been this year. They're playing pretty well with Machado and a few of the kids that they picked up, but nope, haven't been yet this year.
Yeah, cool. So how long ago did you move?
2014. And
wow.
Should have done it probably 20 years before that, but we do it when we do it.
Yeah, right. So, but that's good. You still have family here, so.
I still have family in Chicago, for sure.
Well, it gives them a good place to visit.
Yeah, it does. And we have an extra room here for mom, and mom comes to visit quite often. So there you go.
Yeah, there you go. So, so it's funny. You and I talked a little bit before the show. I have my roots are on the street and being a street guy and things like that. And I did a little digging, and I've known you for quite some time. And so I found a picture on your website, steveolsher.com, of you standing in front of a 280ZX with your Gold's Gym shirt on. And it reflected back to when I had hair, and it was somewhat. I'm not sure if that was a perm or not, but it's funny. You made a comment about I might have sold you a pair of speakers, and then I remember back then I had actually bought a pair of speakers.
I might have been the guy. Yeah,
and I was selling fax machines, so it's no different at the time. So it's hey, buddy, I got a fax machine.
Well, I guess the just for clarity's sake here, when I say and when you say sold a pair of speakers, that would be out of the back of a van, not like a legit, store where you would buy a pair of speakers. This was like out of the back of a van kind of thing. So I was that guy for a hot minute, not too long, but for a minute or two.
Yeah, and sometimes you just do what you got to do to survive or make it to the next gig, right?
Hey, it certainly honed my selling skills, I'll tell you that.
And it was easier than door-to-door encyclopedias. That's what my dad did. So
yeah, right? Yeah, maybe.
You'd always say you'd have to do 100 dials and 20 door knocks to get one, sort of encyclopedia. So
yeah, the power of go for no, right?
Right, exactly. So before we get into, we've got a little snapshot of who you are today. And whenever I think about questions about podcast and this podcast and helping clients, I always think about, what would Steve do? What does Steve say? Things like that. And before that, I knew you as this reinvention guy, which I love because when, again, I want to thank you for making me part of Internet Profits. But when you did that and you actually introduced me on stage, it wasn't anything we had ever talked about, and you just really helped me with an identity piece that at that time I didn't realize who I was, but you clearly articulated who I was. So you were this really cool person that I think has helped reinvent a lot of people. But before we get to that, how did you get to where you are today? And we got a little bit of time here, but I'd like you to take us through the journey of you building your influence to where you are today.
Yeah. You mentioned some of the early entrepreneurial endeavors. I mean, it started actually long before selling speakers out of the back of a van. Being in Chicago, you get a nice snowfall, and as a kid, you grab a shovel and try to go door to door and see if you can shovel some sidewalks and driveways. I don't know, man. Just always been wired to try to make that dollar, and I don't know where it comes from. I mean, people say that you can teach people how to be entrepreneurs. I'm not sure that you can. I think entrepreneurs are born, and they're not made. You can hone skills, but I think either you have that gene or whatever it is that allows you to take those types of risks and be that entrepreneur, or you don't. So I don't know, man. It's just been a really interesting trek. Literally from the time, like I said, I was old enough to pick up a shovel and move some snow around, or a rake and move some leaves around, to DJing in clubs and opening up my own nightclub when I was 19. It was a non-alcoholic nightclub, but raising capital for that and opening the doors of my own place. It's been a really interesting trek, and over the years, I think if you name it, I've done it, which is from catalogs to .coms. And I mean, you'll appreciate this, and we've talked about this. We launched on CompuServe's electronic mall.
That's right. I forgot about that. Oh.
Yeah. So we launched one of the first fully functionally commerce sites in 95, 2 years after we went on to CompuServe, and that became liquor.com in 98 when I picked up that domain. And so that was an interesting period of time. I'd actually worked with my mom for about 9 years during that time. And that company, liquor.com, provided worldwide gift delivery of wine and champagne and spirits and gift baskets. And I got caught up on the .com hype and brought in these lettered saviors to take us to the IPO promised land. And we had the S1 filed, and we were ready to go public in March of 2000. And that's, of course, when everything imploded in that first, really big bubble. That was the original recession. Right. And I walked away from everything, including the domain, for years, and got into real estate development after that, because that's where that next phase of opportunity really was. And so again, reinvented my life at that juncture. And just, man, I'm telling you, from writing books to now podcasting since 2009 and doing live events, and you mentioned internet profits and so on. I don't know. I feel like I'm continually reinventing who I am, and I'm actually getting back into real estate with a new endeavor that I'm launching here in 2019. So it's just always an evolving journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the things I'm thinking about as you make these decisions, and like myself, I got caught in that .com bubble. It was literally, we raised, we got $5 million and became $100 million organization, and I'm worth 47 million on paper. And then you over leverage yourself, because that's what you do.
Yeah.
If you don't know any better.
Yeah.
And you don't listen to everybody, because your first time around, you're like, I got this, I know what I'm doing, and private jets get in your head and different things. And then all of a sudden the carpet gets taken out from under you, and you feel like you're going back to selling speakers on the street.
Yeah. I mean, lessons learned at the top, lessons learned at the bottom, hopefully.
Yeah, right. But there had to be some, you mentioned your mom, which she's a delight, by the way. She called me a few months ago, and she was like, my son, Steve, said I should call you. I need some help. And so she's just a delightful lady. And so I just love her. And so,
good.
So there's other people. Is there other people that maybe you want to mention that helped with the pivoting part? Because I think that's the part that people have the toughest time with. But there's people in our lives, and for me, that I should have listened to and I didn't. And then there's people that I listened to that gave me great advice that allowed me to pivot and reinvent at that point.
Yeah, I've been kind of a loner in a lot of ways for the majority of my life. I've never been one of those people to have those huge groups of friends. It's just not me. I've always kind of been jealous of those folks that have those big groups of friends that go on those big party vacations together, and all that. That's just never been seen a couple of, really good, close friends. And that's kind of how I roll. But the point being, I've never had this big network of people that I've been able to turn to. I don't know. It's sometimes it's worked to my benefit without having the guidance and input from others, right, and relying on their perspective. And of course, sometimes it's worked to my detriment, where I could have avoided probably a lot of brain damage and trials and tribulations. But the main mentor who helped in a lot of ways over the years was actually my grandfather.
Oh.
So my mom's dad, he was the original OE, not the original gangster, but the original entrepreneur. And he started. So you're in Chicago, so you know Foremost Liquor Stores, and he started Foremost Liquor Stores.
Oh, wow! Yeah.
Back in 1939, and so he always had the entrepreneurial bug. Mom went to work for him after my folks got divorced in '77, but he was the original entrepreneur and one of the first to ever franchise anything. Like, franchising didn't even really exist before he came on board and just kind of brought that idea to the table. And there was a couple people doing it, but it wasn't at all like it is now. So, it's been an interesting trek over the years to just see how people like my grandfather dealt with adversity. And the number of stories he could have shared would have been off the charts there. But he provided some really good input early on, not the least of which is, he gave me an understanding that we don't build monuments. And that was one of his mantras, if you will. And it really helped me to understand that today we would use the term pivot.
Yeah. And
yesterday it was more his line of thinking of we just don't build monuments. And basically meaning you don't have to stay with something that you don't want to stay with from a business perspective, right? And you don't have to say that this is something that is set in stone. And basically all he was saying is just be flexible, right? Be open to new ideas, be flexible. And if you get tired of whatever it is that you built and you feel like there's a better opportunity somewhere else, then by all means go and pursue that. And that's, it's really been a mantra that I've taken on for my entire adult career anyway. And I will say that one of the things that I'm really, really good at is helping people identify what I believe is their biggest opportunity, because so much of what I see is that entrepreneurs, or too many entrepreneurs, are stepping over dollars to get to dimes. Yeah. And they're missing out on their biggest opportunity. And so I think that's kind of where this whole reinvention thing came in, is not only, of course, have I reinvented my life numerous times over the years, but I have a propensity for being able to help people reinvent theirs. And really, it doesn't mean changing who you are. It really just kind of means getting back to the core, to the essence of what it is that you're naturally just brilliant at, and what you're, in my book, What I talk about discovering the one is amazing thing you're really born to do. So it's really a matter of just identifying what that is and then pursuing that with strategic abandon.
Yeah, I love that too. And it's interesting that you made that statement about stepping over dollars to get to dimes. Do you think that's because we let too many voices in our head, or do you think it's our, obviously we're developed from how we've grown up, or is it maybe not having enough conversations along the way? What do you think causes that? Because I think that's a big epidemic that's not enough people don't talk about that.
Yeah. The reality for me is it's probably twofold. Number one, we do get caught up in looking at what other people deem as being important, right? And you guys see this all the time in the social space and whatnot. The vanity metrics are in not knocking the whole world of social, but I will say that the vanity metrics, I think, do more harm than good for most.
We agree.
Where you're focused on getting to 10,000 followers, or focused on getting to 100 likes on a post, or this, that, and the other. And if you think about the amount of time that you invest in getting to those vanity metrics, it's a tremendous amount of time that you'll never get back, right? And for most mere mortals, getting to real numbers is really hard to do. I mean, if you've got 100 million followers like a Jenner or somebody like that, I mean, then my God, you got a business in a button, right? I mean, just put something up, ask people to buy it, and they do. And of course, that's a tremendous platform to have. But most people,
yeah, but that's no different than you and I growing up, and the athletes that we grew up with that would hold up the Coke can, or the NASCAR drivers that put stuff on their body. I think it's the new billboard, if you will, effect of who we are.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and I agree. And then look, reality is they had the platform. I mean, if you were the IndyCar driver, you had the IndyCar race and all the television cameras. Yep. I mean, if you were the athlete, you had the basketball in your hand and you had all the television cameras. I mean, it was just television. Some of the numbers on social, rival that of what you see on traditional broadcast platforms now.
Absolutely.
So those numbers were real then, and they're real now for a select few. But reality is, I think that we focus often as entrepreneurs just on the wrong things. And I run 3 multi-million-dollar businesses, and I work 3 days a week, right? So how do I do that? And really, it's just a matter of focusing on the most important elements of business on a consistent basis, and understanding that I can work half as hard to make twice as much by simply focusing on where that biggest opportunity is, as opposed to all the guesswork that most entrepreneurs are unfortunately caught up in, where they're just trying to throw everything that they can up against the wall to see what sticks. And fortunately, I'm smart enough now to be able to turn to some pretty smart folks when needed. And I mean, one of the reasons why we started the show Beyond 8 Figures, which exclusively features entrepreneurs who have either exited for more than $10 million or currently run businesses that gross more than $10 million annually. And part of the reason why I started that show is to be able to build up this platinum Rolodex. And it's really helped quite a bit. There are people who I've had on the show that I now turn to when needed. So it's evolved over time for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think far too many times, I like what you said, because it's part of our philosophy. There's now 4 levels of influencers. Of course, as anything evolves, so does influencer marketing. But there's micro and nano influencers now, where you have smaller audiences with higher engagement. And brands are investing more at that level because the people are more real. It's not as easy to get a Kylie Jenner, nor do you maybe want them associated with your brand.
Yeah.
But you get a real person in your community or your neighborhood or your industry to really be part of the brand, a believer, and take it to that next level. So I like what you said about that, because we believe in, it's not about how many followers you have. It's about how many relationships you have, the relationship of you and your community. So you may have, 10,000 followers, but what do the core 100 look like? The people that engage with you the most. And I think that, and actually we know for a fact that that's what the new tools are working on and things like that, is to say, let's be real. Let's be more real, let's be more connected, and let's have more relationships, which is where you and I came from, to get to where we're at today.
Yeah, for sure. And reality is, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Reinvention Radio, which is a podcast that we've been doing since 2009 off and on, and mostly on now since 2015, and Beyond 8 Figures, which is the show that we launched in 2018. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we have, 100 million downloads. Like we don't get millions of downloads per episode. We're not Joe Rogan. I mean, we're lucky if we're even in a conversation in our respective category. But I will tell you that, the downloads that we have are enough to support the lifestyle that I want.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately the main question is, what is it that you want versus what is it that you actually need? And when we get caught up in those vanity numbers, again, that's really just going after what it is that you think that you want, as opposed to having clarity around what it is that you really need. And the truth is, I know people who have 100 times the downloads that we do, and they'll be lucky to do 10% of the revenue that we'll do this year with the for lack of a better term, the Steve Olsher brand. Yeah. So, they can't fill a room of 20 people. And, why is that? And I think it just speaks to exactly the conversation that you were just having there, which is just the quality of the relationships and the value that you bring to the table, as opposed to just getting caught up in whatever those numbers are, which frankly are pretty darn meaningless.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So, so I was, I grew up a street fighter. Jackson and I are both 3rd degree black belts, and you're a brown belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I just saw another post that you did. You said you don't do as much on social media, but I do follow you. So I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that,
Yeah.
So, as we reinvent, as we pivot, as we go, as we open up a new podcast, as you go back into real estate, how much do you think is how much did you get out of martial arts? I'm always curious to ask this if I know somebody that applies to the way that you are today.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So even as a kid, I had done taekwondo and those sort of things. So off and on over the years, I've always kind of had my hands and feet into something as far as the martial arts go. And the truth is that there's always going to be someone that will hand your butt to you.
Yep.
No matter how good you are. And there's always going to be someone that you can teach.
Yep.
And I just think that the experience of knowing that there's always going to be someone in front of you and someone behind you really just helps bring levity to life and business overall. From the standpoint of, if push comes to shove and I got to put food on the table, I can work really hard and I can go sell speakers out of the back of a van, or I can do whatever I got to do, right? To keep food on the table and to keep the lights on. But at the same token, I also know that there's only so much natural abilities that I have. I mean, I'm not a natural athlete. I'm not one of these guys that's going to, just be able to step onto a mat or step into a ring and just kill it. I mean, that's just never been me. Right. So what that does, that humility, that being humble, the understanding of kind of where I am on the totem pole, so to speak, is something that has allowed me to find happiness and to find contentment and to find fulfillment that, frankly, I struggled with for a long time. But once, again, it ties back to martial arts from the standpoint of just understanding that, you're always going to be a student and you're always going to be a teacher. Right. And to try to be any more than that is kind of an effort in futility.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and we have never ever spoke about that. And it's funny that we both picked that up and have carried that sort of every step of the way.
And I'll tell you, man, and you can probably appreciate this as well. And I don't know how active you are in terms of if you're still full on striking and sparring and all that stuff, but
it's me in a bag and a gym full of stuff, but that's,
there you go. Right. So, in jiu-jitsu, what I often say is you can't teach 20-year-old strength. You can have the best technique in the world, but you just can't teach 20-year-old crazy. It's just, there's something about it. And reality is you can try to learn 20-year-old crazy, but when you're almost, I'll be 50 this year, there's no technique in the world that will combat 20-year-old crazy except for a bit of wisdom and knowledge, right? So
It's funny. It's funny when I first had gone to work at a CPA firm. There was this big out of shape partner that would take us to the Hawks games in Greektown, and he loved to play racquetball. And I'm like, all right, I've never, I played racquetball. I'll bite. And he goes, well, let's bet $20. And I'm like, okay, I'll bet $20 for fun, And so anyway, I would be running all over the court with that real young energy. Yeah. And this guy would just take 2 steps, boom, and take me out. 2 steps, boom. And he just knew exactly where the ball was going to be at any given moment. And I was just like, and I'm running like a crazy person in the best shape of my life, just about. And I couldn't beat him.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely something to be said for wisdom and maturity, right? And so maturity, one of the things that I say is that, maturity is knowing that you have to seek out advice before making important decisions. And wisdom is knowing which decisions are important.
Yeah.
And so
can you repeat that? Repeat that one more time.
So maturity is basically knowing that you should and have to seek out advice before making important decisions. And wisdom is knowing which decisions are really important.
That's huge, man. That is huge. That's Emily, I hope you got that. That should be like 5 tweets right there. So.
I'll send you the meme.
Yeah, right. Exactly. No, it's brilliant, man. That's what I always love about you. I always learn so much about you. And again, I always tell you, I follow your social media posts and you're always like, I don't do that much on social, but when you do it, I get a lot out of it, so don't stop what little you do. All right. I do love your blog and your podcast. So that's right.
Thank you.
That's what I get the most. So speaking about podcast, we now, when did you, so 2009 was the first podcast, right?
Yeah, I did a series of shows for Reinvention Radio in 2009, a little bit here and there over the years. And then 2015 for Reinvention Radio, again, went full board on it. So yeah, it's been off and on for about the last 10 years.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit, because there's a lot of people that wrote in, they're listening, or they're obviously going to download this and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about doing a podcast, because everybody thinks about doing a podcast. Give us the sort of the lowdown of what you've learned and what you teach people. If you're thinking about doing a podcast, fill in the blank.
Yeah. So, look, first and foremost, when I started doing podcasting, it was very different than even when I launched the new show Beyond 8 Figures just a year ago or so. And back in the day, I did podcasting because I just like radio has always sort of been the holy grail for me. Yeah. Like I love radio. And I guess it's just because I love to talk. But, I've always had a love for radio. So the way I was thinking about podcasting at that point was, podcasting is basically the new broadcasting. Just kind of levels the playing field for all of us and gives us all the opportunity to have a microphone. And if we have a mission and a message, then we can reach the masses with it. Now, of course, masses is a relative term, but at least it's available to people no matter where they are. And back in the day, if you wanted to listen to a podcast, it was a lot more cumbersome than it is now. You had to go through a series of steps to capture it and download it and listen to it and this, that, and the other.
Well, and thank you, SoundCloud, for being a pioneer in the day.
Right. And now you look at the dashboards of cars and it's easier to listen to a podcast on the dashboard of a Apple CarPlay or Google CarPlay enhanced vehicle than it is even to listen to AM and FM radio, right? It's just a push of a button right there on the dash. So what's happened is the space, of course, has become a lot more crowded, which means that if you just had a general show, like a general business show or something of that nature, back in the day, you could find a pretty decent audience because there weren't a lot of options. So there are some of the people out there right now who have shows that, frankly, if they launched today, those shows which are really popular now, they wouldn't have nearly the traction because let's just say they're not the best interviewers, they're not the best shows. We don't have to name names here, right. But they benefit from the ascending spiral of when you have a show that people listen to, you show up in the rankings. When you show up in the rankings, then new people find that show. And when new people find that show, you move up in the rankings. And as you move up in the rankings, people find the show, and it becomes this ascending spiral. Breaking into that ascending spiral right now is really hard. When you got NPR and the New York Times and the Washington Post and ESPN and, Will Ferrell and everybody and their mother going all in on podcasting, you're just not going to compete. So what I would say is if you're going to do a show now, one of the things that you really have to give consideration to is, why are you doing it? Right? Like you literally need to start with whatever that end in mind is for you. And if it's just because you want to, catalog your life chronicles, then great. If it's because you want to sit down with some pretty cool folks, then great. But if you're thinking about it from a business perspective, then, I really do think that you have to look at it from the perspective of what is your profit path in terms of your business profit path, and that customer journey that you want people to go on as they go from point A to point B, and not knowing about you to knowing about you to becoming familiar with you to entering into your ecosystem, and then what happens from that point forward. So you have to be really clear on what your profit path is and what that last step is on the path that someone can take with you, and work backwards from that and make sure that that your show supports whatever that particular initiative is for you in your business.
Yeah. In fact, what was coming up for me, just because I know your material and you, is a lot of times I'll tell people that come to me, I'm like, you should actually get Steve's book, What is Your What? Because to me, it's like, that's almost that definition of yourself, of finding that thing and then making sure that you tie it, because it's a labor of love. I mean, it's not, we work besides doing this show. And like you, I got the bugs working on WLS radio here in Chicago. And I was like, man, it was like after a couple of years of doing that, I wanted to have my own format, but then I didn't have 20 grand a month in sponsorship dollars to get it out of the gate, Yeah. But then when this happened, I was like, well, I'm a teacher, I'm an educator. And these started out as coaching sessions, lunch and learns every Wednesday. And all we did was flip the switch and, make it a mission-driven podcast to help people get inspired and educated to build their own influence. But it took a long time for us to get there. And it sounds like you went through that journey as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And, again, it really just boils down to, why are you doing the show, right? I mean, from the perspective of Beyond Eight Figures, I'm doing it simply because I want to build my Rolodex of people that I can connect with. And I want to be able to learn from folks. And I really want to be able to just have this network of people, right, that I can turn to. And when you sit down with somebody for an hour, and especially when you do it on video, like we're doing here, you really get to know someone. And in that short period of time, you can figure out pretty quickly if that's your kind of person, if you want to, if you would take an email from them, if you would take a call from them, and so a lot can happen in an hour. You can cover a lot of ground. And so again, it just really just boils down to, why is it that you're doing the show? I mean, from my perspective, one of the things that we teach, we've got a year-long program called Icon Maker, where we help people put their new media machines in place and help them launch their podcasts and build out their funnel and help them create their online course and so on. It all really begins with the brand. And so one of the things that I'm a huge proponent of is, if you're going to launch a show, it has to be brand aligned, from the standpoint of, actually, I even, my personal recommendation nowadays is, if the name of your show also reflects the name of your online course, that's a winner, right? Like, I'm releasing a new podcast in the fall that'll be called Closing from the Stage. Nice. And that ties into the course that we're releasing called Closing from the Stage, right? So those two ideally go hand in hand, because ultimately you can provide a lot of great value, but the call to action needs to be something that it's an investment, right? It's an investment of your time. It's an investment of your energy, investment of your resources. You need to see an ROI on that. So Closing from the Stage, as an example, we'll sit down with leading closers, and they'll share their tactics and strategies and shortcuts for being able to, really just move people to take their desired action from the stage.
Yeah,
And they're going in depth and all this fun stuff. And then, of course, the call to action for us at the end of the show, and at the beginning of the show too, for that matter, is go get closing from the stage of the program. Right? Obviously, we've just touched on this. Go get that. It goes 100% deeper into all of this, that, and the other. Right? And so, anyway, the point being, I think today you have to be really clear on sort of that nano market, if you will, as you said, and being that nano influencer in a very small market. And if we get 50 downloads in episode, and those people are all interested in learning how to close from the stage, that's why they're tuning in, and we get one person out of every show to enroll in our $2,000 program, that's a decent sponsor for an hour of our time.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's great advice. And I think people need to hear it too. A lot of times they're like, their mind goes to, well, what equipment should I get? And, what should I buy? And this and that. And I'm like, back up, man.
Yeah.
Go get what is your what, and go study and determine who you are and what drives you, because this is going to be a journey. This isn't like a freaking light switch. So.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh man. Well, as always, I always learn so much from you. So before we ask the audience some key takeaways for them, people that are thinking about, because I think the podcast part is a little bit about reinventing yourself too, in a way, because it's part of the journey. What sort of takeaways do you have for people that just, are on the bubble of making a decision and whether it's a podcast or not, but they're just thinking about, man, it's like, am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right spot? Is what I was meant to be? Because I think we all get in that question.
Yeah.
So what would your nugget of advice be for them to just go, hey, do this?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of hours in the day, right? And so what I would say is, if you're sort of in that transitionary period of not really being clear on if you're doing the right thing, number one, don't quit the day job, right? Don't cut off your nose to spite your face there. So let someone else fuel your transition and fund your transition, right? So whatever it is that you're doing, don't stop doing that now. But in those off hours, it's a lot of hours in the day. You can either spend your time or you can invest your time. I mean, most of us are spending a lot of time. If you watched every episode of Game of Thrones, you spent a lot of your time. That was not time invested. I watched every episode of Game of Thrones. So believe me, I understand what it's like to spend your time. But what I'll say to you is, just be really aware of where your time is going. And in the off hours, whether it's before work, you wake up another half hour earlier, or it's after work and you turn off Game of Thrones, or those sort of things, or it's on the weekends, just really dive into what it is that you think you might really be compelled to do. And let's see what sort of traction you end up gaining, right? Because the God's honest truth is that you may find that what it is that you think you want to do actually doesn't bring you much fulfillment at all. And then you may find that what it is that you think you want to do actually is something that you really love.
Yeah.
So you just dip your toe in the water and get started, and then, put your foot in and put your leg in. And before you know it, you're swimming laps, right? But
yeah,
you got to immerse yourself as much as you can in whatever that world is that you think is more attractive than the world you're playing in now. And start working with those that you believe you are most compelled to serve, and if you can be clear on who the people are that you're most compelled to serve, and you start serving them, amazing things really can happen.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for being on the program today.
Yeah, look, we help quite a bit, obviously, in the podcasting world. I mean, not only do I have my own shows, but we've got an event where we give people the opportunity to meet 40 top podcasters, and we give everyone the microphone to take center stage. To pitch the podcasters on who they are and what they do, and they literally get booked on the spot. So that's an event called the New Media Summit, and we do that a couple times a year in San Diego. So I certainly recommend people checking that out, especially if they want to dip their toe in the podcast world by being a guest on a show first. The average person who comes to the New Media Summit leaves with 12 bookings in hand. So you'll get booked on a bunch of shows there. And that'll give you an opportunity to see if the podcasting world is something that you really do enjoy. And so, be a guest on shows first. You can come to the New Media Summit. And then to that end, if you want to connect with top podcasters, maybe grab a copy of a pretty awesome resource that we put out, which is called the Ultimate Directory of Podcasters. And that gives you detailed contact information, including the email address of 670 top podcasters. And so you can grab that. Actually, if you just text the word Olsher, so my last name, Olsher, if you just text Olsher to the number 44222, you can grab a free copy of that. So just text Olsher, my last name, to the number 44222, and you can grab a free copy. We normally sell it for $297, but you can grab a free copy of that.
And it's really nicely organized by industry too. So you guys did a really nice job on that resource. So
thank you.
Yeah, nice job. So Jackson, what did you get out of this, youngster? I mean, come on, you got a couple of senior marketing guys talking here and yapping. What did you get out of the thing besides Game of Thrones?
Yeah, which I actually just started, so I'm really glad you didn't spoil that.
Yeah, everybody dies, Jackson.
No, I know. Well, actually, so I did. My buddy got me hooked on it. He's like, just watch this episode, dude. You're gonna love it. But the episode he wanted me to watch was the second to last episode of the series.
Oh,
nice.
So
I watched it and I was like, this is amazing. So I know everything already, but I still need to know how it happens, how they get. But yeah, I think the coolest thing, or the biggest thing that resonated with me was, the Taekwondo, Jiu-Jitsu reference that you made, because that's something I did and still do, is, that there's always going to be someone that's better than you, but you can't let that, throw you. You know what I mean? You can't let that, you got to get back up. You got to get back out there, and that's at least what it meant to me when you getting back up and being able to teach, others what what you can do, because you can't do everything. And I really like that you said that. And I feel like that's a big thing that, holds a lot of people back. So.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you for that. And then a lot of people are chiming in, immersing myself and what I think I want to do, and really being, I think, curious and a discoverer, curious. It's almost like your inner child is what I was thinking about, Steve, when you were talking about that. It's like, let your inner child play, with and be curious about other things. And Julie says the strongest thing was the people you're most compelled to serve.
Yeah. And I'll say this also, that we live in a pretty fun place from the standpoint of the government actually rewards risk. As strange as that sounds, we're one of the few countries in the world where you actually can take a risk, put yourself out there, and if everything blows up, you're still fairly protected from the standpoint of bankruptcy laws. It's like there's, and I'm not encouraging it. I've been on the verge of bankruptcy twice in my career. I did not have to file for bankruptcy, but it is interesting that so many of us are risk adverse, and I'll tell you that there's only so far you can fall. It's so many of us are risk adverse, and we've got $1,000 in the bank. It's like, what are you afraid of? Losing $1,000? Lose $1,000 and file for bankruptcy, and the government will help you. It's like we're in. It's a mindset shift, and it really and I really live by the mantra of the old Latin expression, Latin phrase of fortune favors the bold.
Right.
And it's true, and here in the States, you really have an opportunity to be protected through the bankruptcy laws if everything just goes to hell in a handbasket. which it very seldomly does. And the opportunity for reward is so much greater than what can possibly happen to you if things don't go as you envision. And I think we lose sight of the fact that, you can fall this far or you can rise this far, and it's just there's a complete disconnect between, how much we can suffer versus how much we can gain.
Yeah, there you go. I love it. Well, Jackson, who's our winners today?
Yeah, so today in the Zoom platform, we have Julie Clark.
Julie.
And then in the Facebook group, we have Greg DeKalb.
Greg, okay. Way to go, Greg. All right, so that's awesome. And so remember, it's your mandate. You have the strongest mission amongst all of our listeners that you must take that Starbucks gift card and treat someone and then teach them with what Steve taught you today, okay? And make sure they know about Steve's website. Make sure they know about the things that he offers. He has a tremendous amount of value that he allows each and every person to have. So please make sure that you take care of somebody else with that, and you will be taken care of forever. Okay, and that really makes you the influencer of who you were meant to be. So Steve, from all of us here at the Social Jack family and the Influence Factory, I want to thank you. And as always, we learned so much from you. And I can't wait to meet you either back here at Wrigley Field or there in San Diego when I get out there.
Yep, sounds good. Appreciate you having me on.
All right, man. Thanks again, Jackson. And thanks to all of you out there. And we will see you online. Take care, folks.
Thank you for listening to the Influence Factory podcast. We welcome feedback and suggestions. You can provide these by visiting our website at www.myinfluencefactory.com. And if you are interested in Social Jack's 90 Days to Influence program, you can simply go to 90daystobusinessinfluence.com and simply ask for the next steps. While our program airs regularly on Zoom webcasts and Facebook Live on Wednesdays at noon Central, we invite you to download episodes on your favorite channel: YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and who knows where else in the future. We will also provide occasional on-location live streams with special guests that we will announce in our community Facebook group, Business Influencer Alliance, as well as on all Social Jack channels. Our mission is to help you build your digital business influence with this podcast, as well as inspire, educate, and entertain those who are hungry to collaborate in a cool place with cool business professionals just like you.